Welcome to Whips in the Dungeon 401.40. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about communication. We've talked about negotiation, we've talked about consent. When we're first playing with someone, certainly the first half a dozen or more times we play with them, we're working with the concept of explicit consent. So communication is extremely important, not only before, during, but toward the end and after a scene as far as communicating. The traditional way of communicating during a scene is with vocal signals. Typically we use green, yellow, and red being almost an international safe word. So someone cussing, saying motherfucker stop, is not a safe word to say stop, not if you've negotiated red as your safe word. But as we all know in dungeon play, oftentimes the music's very loud. Sometimes there's a lot of talking in the dungeon, which we'll talk about dungeon etiquette later, but sometimes it's hard to hear vocal signals. So you might work on other ways of communicating during a scene. Hand signals, we warm up 1, 2, 3, 4, we play 4, 5, 6. A lot of times I'll ask a whip catcher to use visual signals and I'll ask them where they're at. I can do that vocally. Sometimes people lose their voice when they're in a scene. A lot of times it's easier to use hand signals. If someone's an 8, they can give me hand signals and then I can see that. I don't have to hear that while we're playing. So hand signals are sometimes good. Sometimes foot signals work, as long as you work this out before you start your scene. Let's say you're playing with someone, you have a heavy strike and they need a chance to process. They might pick their foot up. As long as their foot's up, you give them a little time to breathe and process the energy. When they put their foot back down, that's a signal for you to continue. Or maybe they need to stop. It might just be stopping their foot would be their agreed upon red word to stop the scene. Another nice visual though is to give them a handkerchief, in this instance a tail bag. They're restrained. If they drop that, then that's your red to stop the scene because they can't proceed. So however you work out explicit consent. We're going to talk about sequencing play in a future video, but typically between songs, I'll change toys, and when I'm in the process of changing from one whip to another whip, I'll check in with the bottom and connect with them and gain explicit consent to continue. So while we've been talking about communication and explicit consent, today's key word is implicit consent.